Do you think the privatization of space travel is a hindrance to the long-term goal of deep space exploration?
It should have happened decades ago.
And
No.
Okay, and actually I agree with you in that sense because, well, I'm not sure decades ago. I think the government had to be involved to learn how to get things going. I don't think
decades ago we knew how to go in and out of low Earth orbit since 1962.
That's right.
So that's decades ago.
That's right, and that's not but that's not deep space exploration. But I think you're absolutely right. The private industry is a perfect place to do low Earth orbit because, and not NASA, because it's boring and dull and
you can generalize it. It's not simply that private enterprise is for low Earth orbit. Private enterprise is for anything where the risks have been pre-assessed by the government investment in the frontier, which is why I think where NASA should live, on the frontier, on the moving frontier, and as that frontier moves, it leaves behind routine. It leaves behind certain needs of the activity, and those needs would then be filled by private enterprise, who would surely do it more efficiently than any government enterprise can. But the frontier, where it's dangerous, it's expensive, and all the risks are unquantified, you combine these three, you cannot establish a capital market valuation of that frontier, and so therefore government has to take the first step if you're going to do this at all. And that's why the post office doesn't have their own postal planes. You rent space in the belly of Delta Airlines because they can do it more efficiently.
Yeah, no,
well, that's true of all science. Medicine is the same way. Business is not going to step in and do fundamental research. NIH is going to do it, and they're going to take that risk. And you can apply it any big risk.
In fact, it's really important. Right now, people are saying, well, you got to fund science that has immediate application. But in fact, the government is there to fund the research that no private industry is ever going to fund because the benefits are a generation away. But in fact, 50% of our gross national product comes from fundamental curiosity-based research a generation ago. And the only way to do that is with the government.
Correct.
Now, we're all agreed with that. But the thing where we may disagree, and I'd be interested to see, because actually it'd be interesting because you're the Planetary Society, and I wonder whether Brian agrees with me on this, because I think many scientists like me would say the frontier doesn't involve people. The frontier that NASA is doing in space, the real science that NASA doesn't involve 100-pound bags of water.
I didn't say science. I talked about
I want to. Okay,
there's a distinction here. Yeah. If you only want to do science in space, you would never send humans.
You agree?
Would send robots. Even the geologist who would love to go to Mars with a hammer would just love it. If you gave the geologist the option, I can send you to one spot, or I can send 100
spacecraft,
100 rovers to 100 different spots that you can pick. They're picking the 100 rovers.
No, actually, that's not true. I'm in the Department of Geology, among other things, and many of my colleagues there disagree and say they think a geologist could do in a little while what rovers could do. I happen to disagree. I think
no. Did you tell them 100 rovers
in
100 different spots?
I did. You know what? I told them. Okay. I told them the real number, which is probably 1,000 different rovers, because you can send. Let me finish for a second, Neil. You can send, as I often say, you can send a rover to Mars for the price that it takes to make a movie about sending Bruce Willis to Mars.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But if you told the geologists it was a one-way trip,
which is what I've argued
but they
for.
still want to go.
They still want to go.
Yeah, then they're just crazy. I mean, why are you even talking to those geologists?
So you guys, just if I may speak briefly about the Planetary Society, we are fighting the good fight to restore funding for planetary exploration. We're trying to get $1.5 billion a year, so we need $300 million for planetary science, and it's being threatened. So fiscal year 14 is coming up for NASA. If you got nothing else to do, please check out planetary.org. and consider supporting this, because our claim is science is what NASA does best, and planetary science is the best of that. And so we really would like you all to consider supporting it. It is such a good value. It's such an amazing value. So consider. And by the way, it's been estimated that what the rover does, built by our very best rover engineers, driven by our very best rover scientists, rover drivers, who are influenced by our very best scientists. What that does in a week, a human geologist can do in about a minute.
Yeah, but
I agree, but the human geologist,
there's the cost.
it's not going to run to 100 different places on the planet.
in fact, actually, the human geologist, I think, most often is not going to make it alive to the planet.
Well, I mean, so on and so on. But
Yeah.
this is where you see it's instead of 10,000 to 1, it's got to be like 1 billion to 1. So we'll get there. The longest journey starts with but a single step.
No, but the other thing I want to, let's stay on this topic for a little longer, because I maintain the reason people are interested in humans traveling in space is because they can die. That's what makes it interesting, and you want to see if they're going to die. But
NASCAR.
What?
I thought that was NASCAR that you're talking about.
But I find. But let me ask you a question. I find it. Okay, I'll ask you this question. When I see a picture from the rover, I'm more excited about it coming from the rover than if it came from an astronaut taking the picture, because the astronaut's using a camera, but the rover is it's part of the rover.
Let me tell you why that's probably not true, even though you think it is.
Okay.
Most people don't know that there were robots as well as rovers on the moon while we were first going to the moon. But you didn't know anything about those because the media focused on the astronauts. And it's the astronauts through which we gain vicarious access to space, because they have mouths, they have brains, they have a childhood memory, they have school teachers that can talk about those astronauts. And I've yet to see a ticker tape parade for a robot. So I submit to you that if at the same time the Curiosity rover landed, if at that same time a human astronaut landed on Mars, you would have known nothing about the Curiosity rover.
Yeah, but
it would have been relegated to page 30, and the front page headlines would have been humans put footprints on Mars. And it's that force which will bring less science than the robot that has a power of influence on our culture that inspires an entire generation to want to do the same thing. My generation, when you ask my fellow scientists, should we send humans into space? No, that's too expensive. Send robots. Yet I said, how did you get interested in space? Oh, because of the Apollo program. And I slap them. I'm saying, what are you...
No, that's it. No, there would
on the other hand, if you remember, if Apollo 13 hadn't been the dramatic failure it was, they would have canceled the rest of the Apollo. They canceled 3 of the last missions. There were 3 Saturn V rockets lying on the ground around space, around the country, because it was so interesting that they abolished the last 3.
No, that's delusional, and I'll tell you why.
It's not incorrect.
That's the facts.
No.
You can argue with the facts.
Watch me.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry. Everybody mentioned their book. It's time for me to mention my latest book.
I don't think anyone mentioned their book, actually.
My most recent book is titled Space Chronicles, but that wasn't the original title. The original title was Failure to Launch.
But
The Dreams and Delusions of Space Enthusiasts. And the publisher says, that's too depressing. You can't have the word failure in your title. But that's what it's about. What you just said is a complete delusion. It presumes that we went to the moon for science. It presumes that we went to the moon to explore it. But that's not why we went to the moon.
Brother Neil, no, it is not. No, it is not.
We went to the moon because we were at war. Sputnik was not just some orbiting spacecraft. It was a hollowed-out intercontinental ballistic missile where they took out the warhead and put in a radio transmitter. The military knew this. That's what founded NASA. NASA's budget for science it averaged over all these years about 25%. The rest has been for geopolitical purposes. All right? So it's the I don't want to die driver in this world. That's why we spent all this money. And so the moment we learn Russia's not going to the moon and it's certainly not going to Mars, We canceled the program. It had nothing to do with public interest.
Okay, now let me. It is a. Let me try.
I got to pull back.
Yeah, you got to come in. But it is. Let me try and bridge that gap a little bit.
I'm going to be silent.
No, you're not. I think it's really important to point out that this is a political issue, and in fact, me and Buzz Aldrin together testified before the House Science Committee on Space Exploration, and when I said that humans don't do science in space, I didn't argue, in fact, even before the committee, that we shouldn't send humans into space. We should just say honestly why we're doing it. We're doing it for adventure. That's why we're doing it.
No, but that's not what funded it.
Hold on.
No, that's not true.
See, you said you wouldn't talk.
I did say that.
Okay.
You can say that.
No,
but
hold on.
There's no there. Okay? No. Just look at the history of everybody doing big projects, and it's never driven by exploration. It's never driven by science. It's never driven by curiosity. Not if it's big and expensive. It's driven by the fact that people don't want to die. So there's a war driver. It's also driven by the fact that people want to get wealthy. So
hold on. We have the Large Hadron
Collider. The Large Hadron Collider.
The Large Hadron Collider.
Do you know?
Oh, no.
No.
Just proves my point.
The Large Hadron Collider. Please remind me of the total construction cost of the Large Hadron Collider.
I don't know, about $10 billion.
About $10 billion. That is 6 months of NASA funding. So you call that big budget? Not here in America, it's not.
Yeah, NASA's budget's about $17 billion. Doesn't go as far as it used to.
So it's expensive, but not on the scale that we're talking about here. That's all the country shared. That's not big money.
Okay.
Big money is a shuttle mission costs $1 billion here. I'm not saying it should cost that, but that's what it does. And who writes those checks? It's people who do it for geopolitical reasons, not because they care about science. Our super collider, the one that you would have benefited from, the superconducting super collider. Started to get funding in the 1980s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
200-mile ring. It would have been
60-mile ring.
60-mile diameter. The circumference.
60 miles around. Yeah.
I thought it was 60 times.
Well, take
pi.
it from me. It's 60.
Pi?
No, it's 60.
Okay.
Better
Circumference
story
is
with
60
200, though.
Ryan,
60.
60.
Circumference?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been saying it wrong all these years.
Well, like
Never
a lot of
mind.
things.
Thank you.
Never mind.
Okay, no. So watch. So here's a super collider. America would have found the Higgs boson decades ago. All right? So what happens? The budget gets cut for reasons, the cost overruns. Excuse me. Okay?
Yeah.
It got cut in the early 90s. What happened in 1989? Peace broke out in Europe. All of a sudden, the physicist, who was the hero of the 20th century for making the bomb, is no longer viewed as necessary to national security. And so the project gets cut like that.
Actually, you got it wrong. The project got cut actually for even sillier political reasons, which was the Texas congressional delegation voted the wrong way. And
if we were still at war, that would have never come up.
Okay.
It's also the International Space Station, right? I mean,
Yes, that's true. That's the top story. The bottom story is we don't longer think we're going to
I-
die.
So what let's leave this topic, but science and politics are, alas, inextricably mixed. And I think...
And politics wins every time.
I think what I would say is that it's vitally important for the public to understand what their issues really are, so they won't be lied to by the politicians effectively, and they can elect people to base policy on empirical evidence and not on ideology or anything else.
Good story.